They say the people who know you best are the ones who know exactly how to fool you. I didn't understand that until the morning my uncle's estate attorney called me at 10:15 while I was folding laundry and listening to the dishwasher hum. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before I go on, I want to ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Have you ever received a phone call that made you question everything you thought you knew about your own life? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And by the time it was over, nothing, not my marriage, not my family, not the story I'd been telling myself for 3 years was what I thought it was. My name is Robert Harmon. I'm 62 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. For most of my adult life, I ran the academic affairs office at Riverside Community College. I hired instructors, mentored struggling students, fought for funding, and spent 22 years building a department I was genuinely proud of. I had planned to retire at 68, maybe 69. I had plans. I had a pension, a timeline, and a life that felt stable in the way old houses feel stable, settled, familiar, maybe a little worn, but solid. Then my wife had a stroke. It was a Thursday evening in October, 3 years ago. My wife and I had just finished dinner. She reached for her water glass, and then her hand stopped midair. Her face went slack on one side, and she looked at me with the most terrified expression I have ever seen on another human being. The ambulance came in 7 minutes. The neurologist told me it was moderate, but that the damage to her left hemisphere would affect her speech and some of her cognitive processing. She would need months of therapy, he said. She would need support. She would need someone home with her. I didn't think twice. I submitted my early retirement paperwork the following Monday. My colleagues gave me a dinner. My former students sent cards. My daughter from my first marriage, living in Denver, called to say she thought I was doing the right thing. My wife's family said I was a good man, and I believed all of it, because I was doing what felt right. You spend 22 years helping other people rebuild their lives. You don't stop and question whether the person you love most is being honest with you. You just do the work. You show up. For 3 years, I showed up. I handled her medications, her physical therapy appointments, her dietary restrictions. I learned to adapt recipes for low sodium. I drove her to her neurologist every 6 weeks at Ohio State Medical Center. I managed the finances, the insurance claims, the house. Her speech had returned mostly, though she often claimed confusion, often asked me to repeat things, often sat in the chair by the window looking distant in a way that broke my heart a little every time I saw it. I stopped playing golf. I stopped seeing my college friends. I stopped being Robert Harmon and became quietly, entirely, a caregiver. And I told myself that was enough, that it was love. The phone rang while I was folding a fitted sheet, a task I have never mastered in 62 years of living. The screen said Whitmore and Associates, my uncle's estate attorneys. My Uncle Gerald had passed away 6 weeks earlier, in late September, at 81 years old. He had no children. He'd spent 50 years in commercial real estate in Cincinnati, and had done well. Probate had moved faster than expected. I knew the call was coming. Mr. Harmon, this is Dennis Park at Whitmore and Associates. We spoke briefly at the reading of your uncle's will. I remembered him. Young, serious, precise. Of course. Is everything on track with the estate? There was a pause. Not long, but the kind that has weight in it. Mr. Harmon, I'm making this call from my personal cell phone, and I want to be clear that this is not an official communication from the firm. I need you to know that before I say anything else. The fitted sheet dropped to the floor. He continued. Someone contacted our office 3 days ago, claiming to be you. This person knew your uncle's name, knew the estate value, knew the account numbers associated with the probate filing. They requested an expedited transfer of assets to a new financial account, citing a personal emergency. They had a phone number that matched your records, and they had answers to your security verification questions. I sat down on the edge of the bed. That wasn't me, I said. I haven't called your office since the reading. I know, he said quietly. I know because I recognized your voice from the reading. This person's voice was close, but not right. I flagged it internally yesterday, but the processing request has already moved one stage forward. Mr. Harmon, if someone doesn't intervene with documentation by tomorrow morning, a wire transfer of $2.8 million will be authorized and those funds will be gone. I couldn't speak for a moment. He said, I'm calling you personally because you did something for my younger brother 8 years ago. He was failing out of his first semester at Riverside. He said you sat with him for an hour after hours and told him to stop running from the hard thing. He graduated. He's an engineer now. You probably don't remember him. I didn't, but that wasn't the point. Mr. Harmon, he said, you need to come to our offices today. Bring identification. Bring proof of your whereabouts on the days of that call. And bring whatever documentation you can find, because someone has been building a paper trail in your name, and they are almost finished. I stood up. My hands were cold. I looked at the laundry on the bed, at the pale afternoon light coming through the curtains, at the reading glasses sitting on my wife's nightstand, at the prescription bottles lined up in the order I arranged them every morning, at the life I had built around keeping her safe. Then I drove to Cincinnati. The drive was an hour and 40 minutes. I spent most of it trying to construct a rational explanation. Identity theft happened to people every day. Someone had gotten my information somehow. A data breach, a phishing email, some technical vulnerability I hadn't been careful enough about. It was unsettling but explainable. These things happened, but something else kept surfacing, quieter and colder than the logical explanations. My security verification questions. The answers to those weren't in any database. They were personal, the name of my childhood dog, the street I grew up on, the year my father retired, the kind of answers only someone who knew me would know. I tried calling my wife on the drive. She didn't answer. I tried again 20 minutes later. Nothing. I told myself she had probably fallen asleep in the chair. She did that sometimes in the afternoons. I told myself not to read into it, but the timing was wrong, and some part of me, the part that had spent 3 years not asking questions, was finally starting to ask them. Dennis Park met me in the lobby and walked me through a side hallway to a conference room away from the main offices. He was younger than I remembered, maybe 30, with the careful manner of someone carrying information he wished he didn't have. He closed the door and spread out a printed call log on the table. There it is, he said. 3 calls over 6 days. The first 2 were reconnaissance, asking general questions about timeline and process. The third was the transfer request. I studied the phone numbers. 2 were blocked. 1 was a Columbus area code I didn't recognize. Did you record them? I asked. We record all client communications, he said. He opened his laptop. The audio file was 43 seconds long. The voice was mine, or close enough that if I hadn't known with absolute certainty that I had never made that call, I would have believed it was me. Same cadence, same flat Midwestern vowels, same slight formality I use on professional calls. It was not a perfect copy. Dennis had been right about that, but it was close. Who could do this? He asked. Someone who has spent a great deal of time listening to me, I said. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked if I could use his conference room for a few hours. He said yes. He brought me coffee and closed the door. I called Marcus Webb, a private investigator my attorney had once recommended. I had his number saved from 2 years ago when a former student had made a false complaint against one of my instructors, and I needed someone discreet. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I knew. I told him about the calls, the voice, the answers to security questions no stranger should have. He listened without interrupting. Give me the Columbus number from that call log, he said, and give me 4 hours. I texted it to him and then sat in the quiet conference room trying to think. The security questions, the voice mimicry, the timing 6 weeks after my uncle's death, exactly when probate was clearing. Someone had known about the estate. Someone had known the timeline. Someone had known the answers to questions I had only ever spoken aloud inside my own home. My daughter in Denver had visited once since my uncle died. She had stayed for a weekend, slept in the guest room, sat with my wife while I ran errands. She had also, I now remembered, asked detailed questions about the inheritance. How was probate going? When would it finalize? Was I thinking about a trust or a direct transfer? I had answered openly because she was my daughter and I'd had no reason not to. I had told myself her growing distance over the past 2 years was a response to my new life as a caregiver. Young people pulled away. They got busy. They didn't know how to be present for the slow, quiet suffering of chronic illness. I had given her every benefit of every doubt. Marcus called back in 3.5 hours. The Columbus number is registered to a prepaid phone, he said, but the purchase traced to a retail store in Dublin, Ohio, paid cash. Security footage from that day I sent someone shows a man approximately 40 years old, athletic build, purchasing the phone. He paid cash, wore a hat, kept his face down. Mr. Harmon, I've seen this before. This is not amateur work. Is there anything else? He paused. I've been pulling financial records. I won't explain how, and I found something. Over the past 18 months, there have been transfers from your personal account to a company called Harmon Wellness Consulting, LLC. Small amounts at first, 300, 500, then bigger. The last 6 months average about 4,000 a month. I had never heard of Harmon Wellness Consulting, LLC. I put the phone down on the table for a moment. The coffee in the cup had gone cold. Outside the conference room window, Cincinnati traffic moved in the ordinary way that traffic moves when the world is ending for one person and continuing normally for everyone else. I picked the phone back up. Whose name is on that LLC? I asked, though I was beginning to understand that I did not want the answer. A long pause. Your wife, he said. She registered it 22 months ago. I think I said thank you. I think I asked him to keep going. I know the room got very quiet. She registered the business, he continued, but the operating address is a UPS store in Westerville. The associated phone number belongs to a man named Craig Bauer. He is 39 years old, former pharmaceutical sales rep, license suspended, currently residing in an apartment in Dublin, same zip code as the phone store. How long has he had that apartment? 2 years and 4 months. I had retired 3 years ago. She had started this 8 months after my retirement. While I was managing her medications, driving to her neurologist, sleeping lightly so I would hear if she needed help in the night, she had been building something else. I asked Marcus one more thing. My daughter, I said. Her name is Christine Harmon. She lives in Denver. Can you pull her financial records? Another pause, shorter this time. I already did, he said. She has received 3 wire transfers from Harmon Wellness Consulting over the past 14 months. Total amount is $240,000. The conference room was very still. Mr. Harmon, he said carefully, I think they've been planning this since shortly after you retired. The wellness company is the financial pipeline. Your daughter is either a knowing participant or, and I'm being generous, she was told a story that made this seem legitimate. How would they fake a voice? I asked. Voice cloning software, he said. It's accessible now. You need a few minutes of clean audio. Anyone who has heard you give a speech, a graduation address, a recorded meeting, 15 minutes of audio is enough. I thought of the faculty recordings. 22 years of department meetings, graduation addresses, college radio interviews, all of it accessible online. I thought of my daughter, sitting at her laptop somewhere in Denver, having heard my voice her entire life, having access to every recording I'd ever made, having 3 years of phone calls with me where she could have recorded every conversation. I thought of my wife in the chair by the window, looking distant. I thought of how rarely I had questioned that distance. Dennis Park knocked and opened the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said. I just wanted you to know the transfer request is still 1 stage away from authorization. If you need more time, I can create a legitimate administrative delay through our internal compliance process. It would buy you until tomorrow morning. Do that, I said. I'll be back here at 8. That evening, I did not go home. I checked into a Holiday Inn near the freeway and sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open and my phone on the nightstand. I called my attorney, a man named Phil Greer, who had handled my early retirement paperwork and who I had known for 15 years. When I finished explaining, he was quiet for a long moment. Robert, he said, this is identity fraud, financial conspiracy, and wire fraud. The federal statute on wire fraud alone carries 20 years. This is not small. Can you file for an emergency injunction to freeze my accounts tonight? He said he could have it done by 7 in the morning. I want a complete hold on everything, I said. Every account she has access to, every joint account, the estate assets still in probate, everything. Done. What else do you need? A family law attorney. The best one, you know, who handles divorce in Franklin County. He gave me a name. I wrote it down. Then I sat in the quiet hotel room and tried to make sense of 22 months of transfers, of a woman I had watched struggle to form sentences, of the careful way she sometimes looked past me when I asked her questions. I had attributed it all to neurological damage. I had read about post-stroke cognition, about good days and difficult days, about how emotional affect could change after a brain event. I had accepted every symptom as documented medical reality because I had loved her and I had not questioned it, and because, God help me, I had believed that my willingness to sacrifice without questioning was a measure of how good a person I was. In the morning, I drove back to Whitmore and Associates with the injunction order, a letter from Phil, and a folder of bank records Marcus had sent overnight. Dennis Park was waiting at the side entrance. He had dark circles under his eyes. "They showed up 30 minutes ago," he said quietly. "Your wife and a man I did not recognize. They're in conference room B. They have a notary with them. That means they're not waiting for the scheduled authorization," I said. "They're trying to push it through manually with in-person documentation," Dennis said. The receptionist stalled them, told them our system was down for maintenance. "I have maybe 20 minutes before they figure out that's not true." I called Phil and told him where we were. He told me the injunction had been filed at 7:02 and was active. Any transfer executed after that filing would be immediately reversible and would constitute evidence of fraud. Then I straightened my jacket, picked up my folder, and walked down the hallway to conference room B. My wife was sitting at the head of the table in a burgundy blazer I had never seen before. Hair styled, posture straight. She looked healthy, composed, nothing like the woman who had asked me twice last Tuesday to remind her what day it was. The man beside her was the one from the surveillance photo, athletic, 40-ish, wearing a blazer that was slightly too new. He had a leather portfolio open in front of him and a notary stamp visible in the side pocket. There were 2 neat stacks of documents on the table. They both looked up when I walked in. My wife's composure held for approximately 3 seconds before something shifted behind her eyes. Not guilt, not yet, but calculation. "Robert," she said, "what are you doing here?" "I'm stopping you," I said. I sat down across from them and opened my folder. I placed Dennis's call log on the table first, then the bank records, then the LLC registration papers with her name on them. The man she was with, Craig Bauer, started to stand. I told him to sit down, and I called him by his name. I told him I knew about the Dublin apartment, the prepaid phones, the voice cloning software, and the 43-second recording that was currently in the possession of a federal fraud attorney. He sat. My wife said my name again, softer this time. I placed the transfer records in front of her. 2 years of payments from her fake consulting company to our daughter in Denver. She looked at the papers, and then she looked at me with an expression I cannot fully describe. It was somewhere between the face of someone who has been caught and the face of someone who has been waiting for a very long time to stop pretending. She said, "You were never supposed to find out." I said, "I know." I said, "The transfers are frozen. The estate is frozen. Phil Greer filed an injunction this morning. Any document signed today is legally void and constitutes evidence." The notary, who had been sitting silently near the window, quietly closed his briefcase and stood up. He said he wasn't going to be part of this, and walked out. I didn't blame him. Craig Bauer tried to speak. He said something about being told the transfer was legitimate, that he had no knowledge of any fraud. I placed his LLC records on the table and told him to explain the $42,000 he had personally received over 11 months as listed director compensation from a company that had no actual clients and performed no actual services. He stopped talking. My wife was still looking at the documents. I asked her one question. "The stroke, was any of it real?" She didn't answer immediately. The silence was long enough that I almost said her name. Then she said, "The initial stroke was real. The recovery was faster than the doctors expected." She paused. I saw what it meant, what it gave us. I felt something give way inside me, slowly, like a structure under load. 3 years? I said. She didn't respond. I told her everything I knew. The consulting company, the voice recording, the apartment in Dublin, our daughter's involvement. I laid it out the way I used to lay out budget proposals methodically, without anger, with every number accounted for. Somewhere during that recitation, Craig Bauer stood up and walked out without a word. I let him go. He would be a call to Phil away. When I finished, my wife asked what happened now. Now, I said, I wait for the police, and I go home and pack a bag. 2 Columbus detectives arrived at 10:45. Craig Bauer was picked up at his Dublin apartment at 11:30. My daughter, I learned later, had been contacted by a federal investigator in Denver the previous evening after Marcus Webb had submitted his findings. She had not tried to run. She had, according to the investigator, cried for a long time and then asked for a lawyer. I drove back to Columbus that afternoon. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. The same brick walkway, the same ceramic pot by the front door that I had planted with mums last fall to give my wife something pleasant to look out at. I went inside and went directly to my study and sat down. I didn't cry. I'm not sure why. I think when you spend 3 years organized entirely around someone else's needs, the shock of betrayal doesn't arrive the way you expect it to. It doesn't come as grief at first. It comes as a strange, hollow clarity, as if someone has removed a wall from a room and you can suddenly see how much space was always there, how much light you were never letting in. I called my college friend Raymond, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. He answered on the third ring and didn't ask why I hadn't called. He just said, "Where are you?" And I told him. And he said he was coming over. The trials concluded 5 months later. My wife received 6 years for wire fraud and financial conspiracy, reduced slightly for cooperation after she agreed to testify about Craig Bauer's role. Craig Bauer received 9 years. He had done this before, not this precisely, but variations on it. There were 2 other women. The prosecutor was thorough. My daughter received 3 years probation and significant community service. She had been told, she said at her hearing, that the money was coming from a legitimate consulting arrangement between her mother and a family health services company. She had not asked enough questions because she had not wanted to ask them. The judge acknowledged that she had not been present at the bank. The judge also noted that not asking questions, when the answers would have changed everything, is its own kind of choice. I do not know what to do with that. I'm still working on it. I sold the house in early spring. I kept what I needed, donated the rest, and drove to Asheville, North Carolina, where I had once spent a long weekend years ago and thought, vaguely, that I could be happy here. I bought a small house on a street with old oak trees and a back porch that faces east. I enrolled in a volunteer mentorship program at the local community college within a month of arriving. Old habits. I found that I was still good at sitting with young people who were trying to figure out what the hard thing was and whether they had the courage to do it. I found that I could still offer something useful from where I now stood. I am in therapy on Tuesday afternoons. I am learning to recognize the difference between sacrifice and surrender. I am learning that love does not require you to stop being a person who asks questions, that devotion and discernment are not opposites, that choosing to trust someone fully is not the same as wisdom, and that when people you love begin to arrange things so that you cannot see clearly, the kind thing is not always to look away. My daughter writes to me. The first letter arrived in February, handwritten, 4 pages, shaky in places. I read it twice, slowly. I have not written back yet. I'm not sure that I'm ready. And I've decided to stop doing things before I'm ready out of a sense that readiness itself is the weakness. It isn't. Taking your time is not the same as running away. My uncle's estate transferred cleanly once the injunction was resolved. The funds are in a trust now, most of it. I kept enough to be comfortable and donated the rest to a stroke recovery center at the Ohio State Medical System, which felt, under the circumstances, like the right thing to do. This morning, in April, I had coffee on the back porch while the light came through the oaks slowly, the way morning light moves when it has nowhere to be. A neighbor's dog came to the fence. I gave it a corner of my toast. I sat there for a long time with no appointments and no medications to organize and no reason to check the clock. I thought about what I would say to my younger self, the one who drove away from a career he'd built because someone he loved needed him. I wouldn't tell him not to go. That's not the lesson. The lesson isn't don't sacrifice. The lesson is keep your eyes open while you do. Trust is not weakness. But trust without attention is not love either. It's just hope, and hope alone has never protected anyone from anything. Here is what I know now that I did not know then. Check your accounts. Not because you are suspicious, but because it is your life, and you are allowed to know what is happening in it. When someone you love begins managing information on your behalf, ask why. Not with accusation, but with genuine curiosity, because you are a person, and your life is your responsibility, not a gift you've handed over. If the people around you become uncomfortable when you ask questions, That discomfort is not something you caused. It is something worth understanding. And if someone calls you a young attorney, a former student, a neighbor, anyone with something they didn't have to tell you, thank them. These are the moments when the structure holds because someone chose to stand in the right place. Be the kind of person others want to call when everything is going wrong. That is not nothing. That is, in the end, what saved me. If this story reached you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. If you've lived through something like this, you don't have to carry it alone. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about the people who survived the worst things their families could do to them and who found a way to stand back up afterward. Your story matters, and so does mine.